Welcome to the Peace Catalyst podcast, where we share stories to uplift, inspire, and encourage you in your peacemaking journey. I'm Becca Tyvel, and I work with Peace Catalyst here in the Washington, D.C. area. And this week, I'm actually joined by a new podcast co-host, Ali Bernison, who is going to be jumping on as the new Peace Catalyst podcast co-host. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much. It is so great to be part of the PCI podcast now on a regular basis. So my name is Ali. As Becca said, I am on staff with PCI and I'm based in Los Angeles, California. And so I, come from a journalism background. So I love storytelling and I love what you've been doing with the podcast. So I'm just so excited to be part of it.
Oh, I'm so happy that you are, and it's just awesome to have you join. And just so our listeners know, Keith Giles is not going to be gone forever. We are excited to have him come back on the podcast to, talk about the things that he's most passionate about, and kind of explore more of the go deeper on different topics within peacemaking. So Keith is not going to be the official co-host on a regular basis, but you will definitely be hearing from him again. Yeah, thanks, Ali, so much for jumping in.
Of course. Yeah, mighty big shoes to fill for sure. But yes, excited to continue hearing from Keith for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to miss like our little Marvel discussions. Are you a Marvel fan?
I am not. Oh no. If that's a deal breaker, I can become one. But yes, I mean, I'm engaged to a certain extent. I've definitely seen some of the movies, not every single Marvel movie that's ever been made, but
it's not a deal breaker.
Okay, that's my first project.
Yeah.
Become an expert.
Peacemaking is the most important thing. So
sure, yeah. So, yes, if you enjoy the Peace Catalyst podcast and what Becca and Keith have been doing, you can do us a favor and take some time to rate and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This just helps boost our visibility and encourages others to also listen to what the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys in advance for doing that.
Yes. So every week we have been doing a peace quote. And so today the quote is brought to you from Melanie Greenberg, who is the director of peace building at Humanity United and the former president and CEO of Alliance for Peace Building. And the quote is, "Peace is not something that happens on its own. Peace needs to be carefully, creatively, and thoughtfully built every day."
Yeah, I love that quote. And I think it's really relevant to the conversation that we're going to be having today on the podcast with these amazing women that we're going to introduce shortly. But I love this idea of, it's something that is required of us every single day. It's not just like a short-term project that you complete or a one-time program that you do, but building peace is really a full-time commitment, and living that out requires a lot of, careful, creative, thoughtful ideas and approaches to fostering peace in our communities. So I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're really excited this week. We are kicking off a brand new series on Afghanistan. We've been seeing a lot about what's been happening there in the news, and obviously very heartbroken by the collapse of the peace process, and seeing so many Afghan people having to flee the country. So we just wanted to take some time to listen to those voices and hear from Afghans as well as those who are working alongside them for peace. in Afghanistan who've been working alongside them for a long time now, and also working with refugees locally, and hearing from Afghan refugees locally just to get the chance to learn from them and their stories and see how we could be engaging as peacemakers on this topic.
Right. So this week we have the privilege to interview several individuals from Mina's List. So the organization's executive director, Tanya Henderson, the advocacy director, Teresa Casale, and founding member of the Afghan Women's Network, Palwasha Hassan. And Mina's List is an organization that seeks to build just and peaceful societies by advancing women's political leadership and participation globally. So they champion equal and substantive representation for women in national governments around the world. So they do incredible work and have been for many years now, in Afghanistan and in other countries as well. So I am really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we are so incredibly honored to have all of you with us today on the Peace Catalyst podcast. Tanya, Teresa, and Palwasha, thank you so much for joining us. Really incredibly honored to learn from you all in your work with Mina's List, and to give our listeners a chance to learn from you all as well. So thank you for your time. Um, Tanya, I'm wondering if you could just kick us off and introduce yourself and Mina's List.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you so much. This is such an exciting conversation, and I'm really excited to hear what we're all going to uncover and unpack today. But my name's Tanya Henderson. I am a human rights, women's rights lawyer by training. But I've been working on the Women, Peace, and Security agenda under UN Security Council Resolution 1325, always a mouthful, since 2009, and then worked on the US National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, and then the Women, Peace, and Security Act of 2017, which eventually got introduced. And through that work came to the realization, the awakening, that we needed women decision makers and policy makers to really implement this, in many ways, what had been a grassroots civil society agenda of women activists pushing for women's inclusion and peacemaking, conflict prevention, peace building. And so with collaboratively with Palwasha and her sister Shinkai Karakal, who's an MP from Afghanistan, came up with the concept for Mina's List. And so Mina's List partners with in-country women's rights and peace organizations and has them identify grassroots women's leaders that help get women that could be good political leaders and really advance a women's rights and peace agenda at that high level decision making. So we founded Mina's List in 2014 and have been working to help get women elected to parliament in Afghanistan since 2015. And the model, I think, has been pretty effective. Like in 2018, we trained 50 aspiring women candidates in Afghanistan from 32 of 34 different provinces. And of those women, 37 became candidates, 8 won new parliamentary seats. And so I really think that collective model of women, civil society, and women political leaders working together really has built that. So that's me and Mina's List. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible, Tanya. It's so humbling to hear about the important work that you're all doing and to see that, giving women that opportunity to step into positions of leadership is incredible. So thank you. And Teresa, can you also introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your policy and advocacy work?
Sure. So my name is Teresa Casale, and thank you so much, Becca and Ali, for having us on this morning. And as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for Mina's List. So it is my job to make sure that U.S. policymakers in particular always have, number one, the Women, Peace, and Security agenda top of mind. But of course, Afghan women in particular, especially these past 2 years, as we've been focusing in on that area of the world and everything that has unfolded. And so I came to this work also with a background at the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, not nearly as long and involved as Tanya and Pal and some of the others, but with a skill set in policy advocacy, jumped in as the Women, Peace, and Security Act was passing. And then as it was, we were focusing then on implementation. Once it was successfully passed, it was clear that women in Afghanistan were some of the most that we needed to focus our efforts there, most particularly because of everything that was at stake and remains at stake. So that's my area of work. And before the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, it was peace building more broadly, particularly in Israel Palestine, as you know well.
Thanks, Teresa. Yes, it's been so fun to partner with you on that. And I know that even at our church community here in DC, you've been speaking to our community about the importance of women in peace building and how that impacts peace processes. So we've learned a lot from you in that area. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Palwasha, could you please also introduce yourself and some of your women's rights work in Afghanistan?
Thank you. So I'm Palwasha Hassan, and I'm so glad to be here today with Tanya and Teresa and all of you. I think much that Tanya said, I feel so proud that I had small contribution in being with her, supporting her bigger vision for women, especially political empowerment. But my work started in Afghanistan almost 25 years back, or 26 years back, when I was still younger woman, refugee woman in Pakistan, and I was going to school. And the kind of sense that I had for my community and women. And I had the chance through the organization, which I've been working just few months before as a director, AWEC, Afghan Women Educational Center. I was volunteering there, and I went to this wonderful conference called Beijing Young Women Leaders Program. And I think that young leadership program has really changed my look to the whole issue of women empowerment, working together, and starting a platform where women can mobilize themselves, strategize for advocacy, which was not so familiar at that time among Afghan women. And in my return, we started sort of the layout of the Afghan Women Network. And I think since then, I haven't looked back. And each year we came with some idea. Till 2001, when U.S. government has started attacking Afghanistan, when the Taliban regime has violated the sort of aftermath of 9/11. So our idea of women in peace started from that point, asking for U.S. not to bomb Afghanistan and engage in a more peaceful dialogue in Afghanistan and let Afghan not to suffer anymore. And that has become an integrated agenda in Afghan Women Network then, which was passed on through different management which came over the years. But I was working with different projects in 2002 when there was political changes in Afghanistan, and there was more possibility for women to work. I have started as the first woman a, a sort of donor with managing some small funds for women, and I had the first time chance of traveling to different provinces of the country. So many of these small initiatives, which we were sort of seeing at the seed funding, has turned to big organization over the years in Badakhshan, in Balkh, in Herat. in a eastern region. And that was a kind of like work that I still support that because I see women groups as a real change maker in women life and giving them that chance of empowerment. That was some of the work, and then I've been involved because with every post-conflict agenda there is always reforms and laws in the country, and I've been involved in at least 4 laws that has been had direct impact on women's situation, from Constitution of Afghanistan, then the family law, and then personal law, and eradicating violence against women law. I think that was like kind of big benchmark in my career. We achieved a lot through the Constitution for the clause on equality, for more political participation of women, especially around women political participation. The quota that we have secured, almost 2 women from each province in Afghanistan. That was huge kind of like achievement that had. But other than that, I've been involved for several years with women education and girls education and young women leadership. So it has been huge, and it looks to me like I've been involved everywhere. But that is the thinking, like in Afghanistan, because we suddenly had a few opportunity opening with the political change in Afghanistan, and we didn't look like we shouldn't lose this opportunity, and whatever is possible to support women empowerment. And I think women in Afghanistan generally took bigger advantages of partnership with international community, with women rights organizations such as Mina List and several others, to make sure that we stay like a strong partner and be able to make change in women and girls' life in Afghanistan. So unfortunate, mid-August, still continuing my work, sitting in office, and although for some months we knew that there are some changes happening, not changes, unfortunately, Afghanistan was falling to Taliban back. But we thought like maybe till the last moment we are able to make some changes in women life and continue our struggle. And there was a moment that we had to maybe take a pause or give up. I don't want to say the word give up, it's a stronger word. But I think at some moment it became more important to survive, and had to focus on family members and ourselves. And so through that process, myself and my family have been evacuated through humanitarian parole and through support of my friends like Tanya and others who helped to make sure that women are included along other military target, because the concern is always partnership for the governments with the people who help them in war, maybe not in peace. And we were that part. Our contribution was not taken important by policymakers. We were seen as less contributor at the point. At times, we were considered spoilers. But we knew, like, we are seeing peace much bigger than being involved in the military, or our biggest weapon was writing letters. Our biggest weapon was speaking in webinars and policy recommendation and stuff like that. And at times women went on the street. So these are the continuous advocacy that I've been involved, and now in US, I will soon be starting some work with Georgetown. I feel so privileged that I'm getting some work to continue some of my work and try to reflect on the experience that I've got over years. and also have the time how to make sure that Afghanistan experience and that we had through organization like AWAC and several others. We still stay connected to that, but also make sure that we don't lose our achievement. We have always been calling on policymakers to help us. We know nobody helped us with that, but I think we trust ourselves and we trust our partners and friends. With their help, we can still continue this and make
Mm.
sure that women activists, women's rights still matters and still remain relevant when there is any talk regarding Afghanistan. So I stop here.
Thank you so much, Palwasha, and thank you for sharing your story with us and being willing to talk with us a little bit more about the work that you were doing and your experience. And it's awesome to hear that you'll be planted at Georgetown and continuing to build that work, build upon that work, and continue advocating for women's rights and political involvement. Um, and going off of that, I was wondering if all of you could maybe expound upon just giving us a little more background on the Women's Peace Forum that you all have been facilitating. And if you could talk a little bit about, for our listeners, why was it important for women to be a part of that process of
Mhm.
building peace? And, if women had been involved more directly, what would that have looked like and how might that have impacted the peace process?
I think just framing the context of what was going on at the time. So actually following the 2018 elections where, we had 8 new women members of parliament get elected on a women's and peace platform, 5 of them from Taliban controlled regions. 2 months later, President Trump began to negotiate a quote unquote peace agreement with the Taliban. And I think everyone was honestly quite shocked. I mean, first and foremost, why is the US negotiating peace with the Taliban, right? Why wasn't this an internal Afghan government, Afghan populace, peace negotiation? But that said, that's what began to happen. And so our partners, our women's organizations in Afghanistan, like PAL and others that work with the Afghan Women's Network, Maria Krami, and many of the other women leaders said, well, we have to be included. We have to be part of this process. The U.S. cannot negotiate a quote unquote peace agreement with the Taliban and essentially negotiate away the 20 years worth of work that we have dedicated our lives, put our lives at risk to secure. So the women be organized as they so astutely and strategically do, came up with, nominated a delegation, came up with policy recommendations, and began lobbying the international community, the US, to be included in those peace talks. And this was January 2015, I believe, February 2015. We were able to raise money. Mina's List helped raise money along with our partners to send the women there. And long story short, they weren't issued the visas to attend any of those talks. This advocacy then turned into a much broader coalition. In many ways, it mobilized women leaders across Afghanistan, and and I'll let Pal talk a little bit more about what was going on in country. But 2 coalitions came out of this. One was the Our Voices, Our Future, which mobilized women across Afghanistan, and the other was Stronger Together, which was an international coalition of Afghan women leaders, Afghan women diaspora, and then those of us that work to support Afghan women in peace, security, women's rights. And these became very, very active. So fast forward, a year later, and when I say very active, I mean we had policy meetings. We, were doing recommendations, as Pal mentioned. Many letters were written. But fast forward a year later, when the intra-Afghan talks began, again, women civil society leaders said, okay, this is great. You've got 4 official members of the Afghan negotiation team, but where are the women's voices from the ground? We need to be included. So that's when the Stronger Together Coalition, Mina's list, some of our other partners came up with this concept of first, it was a peace forum that would be held in parallel to the talks. And then and actually that was going to include 200 women for a week, in Doha, with multiple different activities and events on peace building, peace relations, outcome documents. And then President Biden got elected and fast tracked the peace process to have this Istanbul peace conference where essentially he was going to tie up the Afghan peace talks in 3 weeks. So once again, the women pivoted, and then we work to have a parallel peace process for Afghan women with 100 women from across Afghanistan. And these women were going to come to Turkey. We got we had support from the highest levels of essentially all multilateral stakeholders. So the UN, UNAMA, US, Norway, even Afghan government, to have these women come and present their recommendations, present their red lines on what women thought should be included in that peace process. And I think I'm going to stop here and tag team Teresa to, okay, now we're in Turkey, then what happens? And then maybe Pal can take us on to how we pivoted in Kabul.
Yes, it was something I will absolutely never forget. We worked very, very hard to organize that event in Istanbul, and worked with our international partners to get the delegates identified and mobilized and ready to fly from Kabul to Istanbul. Of course, they came from the provinces all across the country, which is, can be very difficult. And Tanya and I flew out to Istanbul and were completely ready to receive them and execute the event. When as soon as we landed, we received messages that the Taliban was boycotting the talks and would not be coming. Also, at the same time, we were planning all of this during COVID, and gatherings of any kind were a little bit difficult to pull off. So with those complications, the government of Turkey denied the visas of women once again to be able to come. But we said, okay, well, these talks can still happen. The U.S. was saying they're merely delayed. That we'll still get the Taliban here and make sure that it happens. So we set up shop in the hotel where we were supposed to meet everybody. And 2 days later, the president gave his speech of non-conditional and complete withdrawal of U.S. troops by September 11th. And with that announcement, we knew that the Taliban definitely wasn't going to show up to the table, that they no longer had incentive to do so. And essentially, the peace process and the parallel peace process were canceled. We thought maybe there's still a possibility that this could happen, but we're not entirely sure when. I said, okay, well, I'm going home. I went home to my family in California. Tanya stayed just in case something, was going to be cobbled together to still happen. But meanwhile, we had 100 women sitting in Kabul ready to get on a plane the next day, and that absolutely did not happen. But we were able to pivot a bit, and for that part, I will send us over to Palwasha.
So I mean, this was not the first time. First of all, in the last moment, we had all these changes, which was affecting always our activity, our mobilization, and great planning. And we were so ready for Turkey. Women came from all the provinces. They were in Kabul. And here we knew we cannot go, and suddenly a lot of things changed. for different reasons. Besides what was the issue with Taliban not agreeing to come to Turkey, but also for other reasons, where a big number of women was seen again as an issue. So for 100 and so women who were ready, we were told that maybe only 40 women can make it to the next meeting. Anyhow, we thought like, and the women were so eager, they came with a lot of thinking, and so we organized immediately a meeting. And the next day was also Ramadan. For those who knows, it's a fasting month. And in the first day of fasting month, a couple of us, we spent the whole day of Ramadan in our office. I think here the issue of the faith and religion, everything comes. How do you see your own faith in what way? And we see it like how we can do more work for women and peace, and that is also part of the whole religion that we follow. So we spent the whole day, and it was just before the breaking fast that we left the office in planning. And the next day we organized a meeting for 2 days. So, we had 2.5 days actually. We organized a workshop. We discussed all the concern topics which we think were relevant to the Turkey, but overall to the political discussion which was was supposed to be going between Afghanistan side, the Republican side, and the government and Taliban in that time, and see it how women see those issues, where women see how women see government, how women see participation, and all different topics from a very gender and women lens. We had this discussion, collected ideas, and then women had presented their papers, which was later on put into one or two pages that we put together, all those recommendations that women have made. Um, of course, it was disappointing that none were able to have direct interaction. Women remain, I know, till the last moment, women wanted to speak and negotiate about their own rights on the table, face to face with Taliban and other parties, to tell them what is their view, and and the important point that the women were making, that we as women didn't see peace as a main domain. We were seeing it as our first concern. Um, uh, Unfortunately, that meeting didn't happen, but our points we tried to convey through several different meetings and forums that followed after that, to reflect it in one or other way. Um, uh, I think that's it.
Yeah, Pal, that's amazing. Actually, can I jump back in here? Because I feel like you're underselling the recommendations that came out of that conversation. And I'm sitting here, I just pulled back up, the workshops that Pal was referring to. I think you had participation of upwards of like 90 women from across Afghanistan. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they broke up into topical groups based on the various topics that were going to be discussed, were on the agenda to be discussed in the between the Afghan government and the Taliban. So everything from governance and power sharing to ceasefire, monitoring, verification systems, fundamental freedoms, constitutional reform procedures. So the women in their workshops dug deep on each of these topics, women's rights under Islamic law, and came up with multiple, actually 60 recommendations, and they were nuanced and strategic, and even now when I reread them again, I'm just reminded how how smart women are, and how smart and strategic and thoughtful and precise. You know, the Afghan women were in making these recommendations. So you know, I mean, I'm just going to throw one out just to give an idea. So, like, one topic was reintegration and rehabilitation. And their recommendation was that any peace agreement must accelerate a comprehensive and inclusive demobilization, disarmament, reintegration, and rehabilitation program. The program must include the collection of illegal and unregistered guns throughout the country. Illegal arms dealers, traders, and traffickers inside and outside Afghanistan must be identified and brought to justice. And that's one of 5 recommendations just on that one topic. And, you know, how many in our whole, you know, in the international dialogue on peace and security in Afghanistan, you know, when have you really heard anybody else talking about demilitarization of Afghan society? Of, you know, bringing, you know, arms dealers to justice, right? Like, you know, collection of illicit weapons. This is what women bring to the table. And actually we were able to, Mina's list, actually with Teresa's help, and I'll let her talk a little bit about that, we're able to take those 60 recommendations from the women and then turn them into policy recommendations. And I don't know if you want to continue, but Teresa, I'd love for you just to chime in there about what we did with those policy recommendations, including maybe even the Zoom meetings that were so cool.
Absolutely, and I think it's a really interesting and important part of the story, because you're absolutely right. The 60 recommendations were much more than 1 to 2 pages. Pal, they went definitely longer than that, and they were so substantive and so important, and I think still relevant even to this moment. But afterwards, when we had this document, we realized that we needed to do something with it. Fortunately, some of the relationships that we have with Congress, you know, Congress has a long history of at least trying to support Afghan women's rights and having it as a major policy priority. And so we worked with the Democratic Women's Caucus to pull together an event where all 100 of the women peace delegates actually were able to join a Zoom meeting to present these recommendations and talk about their experience with the peace process and give that information to the women members of Congress themselves. You know, they weren't able to give it to the peace negotiators in Istanbul when that meeting didn't happen, but there were still listening ears and people who wanted to know this information. And that's one of the important parts about women's leadership, correct? You know, we found a closed door when the peace process collapsed, but there was an open door with women leaders in Congress. And that is one of the reasons why we work so hard to get them elected, no matter where we can, because women support women in those leadership roles. And so we had this extraordinary meeting, excuse me, where, because of the wonders of Zoom and because of the ways that the pandemic has changed the world, that all 100 of these women, like I said, were able to join. And we had, simultaneous translation going in Dari and Pashto. And then we had open discussion and the women able to submit questions to the policymakers. And that kind of direct interaction, I think, wouldn't have necessarily been possible just a few years ago. But it was, all 100 women were on the screen right next to, Representative Jackie Spear and some of these other more, longtime office holders in the U.S. Congress. And fortunately, those recommendations did make it into a lot of their thinking and a lot of their kind of internal advocacy, and made it into recommendations to the White House, and have formed, how they think still about how to support Afghan women and girls going forward. That was a pretty major achievement, to at least have all of those women on the phone having direct interaction with members of Congress.
Wow. That is so incredible. The power of women organizing and coming together and yeah, helping to equip and empower each other is amazing. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for sharing about the Peace Forum. It was so great to hear from, just being an idea to execute through execution, and the outcome of that sounds just absolutely incredible, and having to shift to different circumstances. Yeah, such creativity. So thank you guys for sharing. So yeah, Palwasha, I know you shared a bit about what it was like to leave the country with your family from a work perspective, and something that you said that touched me was that in that time it was more important to survive, and so just leaving had to become the priority. So if you feel comfortable, I think we were hoping to hear a bit more about how that felt, what that was like when the peace process collapsed, and what evacuation looked like for you and your family.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Tanya, for focusing back on the 60 points through women consultation. To be honest, I don't recall everything after being through all this trauma of leaving Afghanistan under circumstances that you have been witness. It was not it was difficult and very from different perspective. First of all, although for some months when Taliban were advancing and they actually gave up on the peace process and they wanted to have a military win, we knew that they will be sooner or later in Kabul. But still, mentally, we were still not prepared to live, for instance, in that way. Um, uh, it was not a normal trip because there have been, sorry for so much emotion. I think a lot of women has put their life in their work in Afghanistan. Awake alone has been the product of women 30 years of work. And a different time with very less resources, with a lot of difficulty, women has struggled to put something to change, and it was making the change in the work. And so it was not easy for me to just close the door of the office. And in my personal life, also, just to uh, pack your bags and climb the plane. It wasn't. It was not like that. So you literally had to leave everything uh, in few hours because the first day when Taliban came, I was still in office, and my colleagues informed me, and they came to my room. And my program manager, she was crying when she came to my room, and she said, "The Taliban are next door," and they were all so terrified, and they want to leave to go to their home. And Kabul has very busy traffic. Maybe it's difficult for us to live there. So the next day we had to leave. We went to um, we went to airport actually. We went to airport because through our friends, our pickup was arranged. But when we went to airport, few people, at least four person were killed that day. There was firing and all that, and we couldn't get near to the gate where we wanted. So we left that place. We drive so much and far away that had to come back, like almost get out of the city because there was no way around to come back. And we left that day, and maybe next day or so, we were again informed that we can go. This time it was better organized, but we went through a different gate to the airport, and this time the US soldiers were there, but they had no clue who we are, and they didn't recognize some of the markers that we had, like for instance showing white cloth and showing our e-visa. None of them were acceptable to them, and there was a lot of people who were pushing you, pulling you, and I had my mother in wheelchair. We had two kids with us, uh, but like we were not worse than everybody, because everybody was in the same condition. Situation was bad, and pull and push and thing like that. But finally, we made our way. There was short intervention by Taliban who came in, and suddenly they pushed the man. And when they pushed the man, we found that way to get through the slot and get closer to the soldiers. And by this time, our contact on the gate came close to us, and we entered. But I understand the same day several of other friends either left or they never had that chance. Like it was a split of minutes that we got that chance and get in, and we were sort of lucky to get in. But then inside the airport, it was terrible. There was no place for 2 days. We had to stay there. Um, Somehow, I think it was the second night. Honestly, I keep my memory lost, but it was second or third night that we found our place in one of the military plane. We didn't knew where we are going, and because we were thinking we are going to Qatar, but it went to Kuwait. Only warm water was there, and the doors were locked. There was no air conditioning, so small children start fainting, and then again. I had to raise my voice, and I told one of those guys who were in the plane. I said, "Are we in the concentration camp, or is it this is a flight?" So after some time, this woman, she was a military woman and very kind, and she came back to me, and they opened the back of the plane again after 2 hours of heat and all that. So we had some oxygen, and after that we had a flight to um, another country, Bahrain. And in Bahrain, we were so well received in the airport. They gave us water, they gave us, they also brought fruit and, things to feed us, to give us water. There were doctors. We were so happy and blessed that felt that time. And I immediately took my mother to doctor, and he told me she's okay, just to give some energy and stuff. She's feeling so weak, and then we give her some food, and all of us eat. And people start taking like as soon as we got to our rooms, everybody was rushing to showers. There were showers, common showers for everyone, and we used that. And after several days we had this chance, and I feel so good. I think for 2 days we rested there. That was incredibly relieving. After 2 days, we had another flight. We were still not sure where we are going. Nobody was giving us full information. Uh, we knew we have flight. We are going to one of the destination. We were thinking maybe to Albania, but then in the airport, in the plane, we were told that this plane is going to Washington. So we ended up in DC. But in DC, another strange place we came, and we were told again if we go to one of the military bases, we will be helped with our paperwork and all the stuff. So again, we decided, okay, we went to this military base. Again, we didn't knew like how much time it will take, where will we be, and so we went to military base, and it was people came and tried to welcome us, but the base was very with very tough conditions. There was one big room, and but at midnight we felt so cold because Wisconsin has very much is very much cold at night. At daytime it is warm. At that time it was warm at daytime, and when night was terribly cold. And uh, so we had some towels. At night we wear our towels. There were a few blankets we shared, and somehow we spent the night, and slowly we learned how to keep ourselves warm, put beds together, try to have share same blanket, or put two blankets together to make it warmer for us. And eventually food, we found like, okay, where the food was served and stuff like that. So the food was good in the beginning. After like maybe a week or so, the food becomes so small amount that some of us were not even filled with enough food. But eventually, it's last for 2 weeks that we didn't had bread. For instance, where Afghan main food is bread, like they eat in everything. And then, but the good thing was like we there was the head of the base was a woman, and she reached out to start speaking to us, and we spoke about our problem. So she made a lot of changes since we spoke to her. They give us additional blankets. They give us the food amount. The portion become normal. The food didn't become better, but at least the portion increased, and everyone had sufficient food to eat. And yes, things changed. Not drastically, but a lot of things become better. Uh, yeah. And but we spent like 1 month. We our paperwork was done, and then the next month we were doing nothing, but we were sitting in base, and nobody was processing. Nobody was telling us when our work will be done, how long we will stay. And that was the terrible thing. Each person was suffering. I saw that some of the younger ones become depressed. My friend son, uh, he started not talking to. He was become quiet, and he was not talking to anyone. Uh, and we slowly saw like the sign of depression in different young people around us. Um, and in ourselves, I remember one day, with the whole day and night I was crying, um, and I couldn't help myself. Uh, we, we saw that we are getting depressed here. I don't want to sound it very terrible, because I do understand we left. I don't know, maybe another problem, and we came here. Somehow, uh, I know people try to help us. The base people were trying to help us, but I think this whole process was so traumatic, and uh, that we didn't have the same strength to face everything like that. And I'm glad on the intervention of my friends and family. Like 3 weeks before we left the camp, the base, and now in Virginia, and so many of my friends are trying to help me to get over the housing situation, a settlement, a new environment, and it's helpful.
Thank you so much for sharing, Palwasha, so vulnerably about something that happened so recently. Is just what I've been thinking about. Is this isn't years ago? This was months ago, and so thank you very much. I lost count of how many legs of travel, but it just seemed like so many, different spaces of waiting, whether that was on a plane or in a bus, or yeah, constantly switching hands and just in questioning where next. And so yeah, there are just no words. It sounds incredibly disorienting, and definitely a testament to your strength. So perhaps as a closing question for this conversation to everyone here, where next? Where do we go from here? What is Mina's List working on currently that you would like us to know about?
I can jump in a little. I think that, just where this conversation has gone has shown just the incredibly difficult space that all Afghan women are in right now, and what has been the consequences of a lack of peace. That is very real, and why we try so hard and fight so hard um, to have peace, because the lack of it is very painful. And I think that for anyone following headlines, folks know that Afghanistan is now in a pretty tough spot. Not only is the country facing life under the governance of the Taliban, but also an acute humanitarian crisis that Afghan women leaders have been warning about was coming for months and months. Not only is there political crisis, but also famine that has been exacerbated by months and months of drought. COVID-19 is still also, of course, a problem and a major public health crisis as well. And in any crisis, in any humanitarian crisis around the world, of course, women and girls bear the brunt of that. So for Mina's List, of course, we are going to continue focusing on making sure that that it's not just headlines, that policymakers take action to relieve in whatever way is possible the suffering of millions and millions of Afghans, and continue to support the refugee response that, of course, is now needed in many parts of the world, including here in the United States. And always, as always, making sure that women and girls and the unique needs that they face in those scenarios are never forgotten and are met. But we, as Mina's List, are going to be specifically focusing on making sure that our friends like Palwasha and other leaders of Afghanistan who spent their lives building democracy and equality and fighting for women's women's rights can rebuild their lives now after this thing that they have been through, that they can continue leading, continue doing their important work, but from wherever it is that they are. And so from folks here in the United States, we're actually in the middle of a fundraising campaign to make sure that resettled refugees, women leaders, have cash assistance. We feel very, very strongly that there are lots of support and assistance options available to folks who have just been displaced. But cash is probably one of the most powerful ones because it's for them to decide how they can spend and what they need and how their needs can be met best. It's most flexible, essentially, which is what preserves decision-making power and agency. So we're going to try to partner with 10 women and their families to give some small grants there if we can raise about $50,000 so that folks can continue rebuilding their lives and their incredible and important work that goes forward, because the women and girls of Afghanistan are in more need than they've ever been. And so those leaders who did choose to leave so that they can survive will continue their work from wherever they are. So that's what we're going to continue to support as Mina's List, and just as women who care.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for our listeners, we're going to be sharing the link where you can give to support those women and their families. So definitely check it out in the episode description. And I just want to thank all of you for your time today, and especially Palwasha for being willing to share your story with such vulnerability. We just really honor you and grateful for you being willing to share that with us. So thank you so much. And we're with you. You're not alone. We want to come alongside you however we can. So thank you so much.
Can we ask Palwasha, is there one specific thing that people of faith across the United States can do to support people like you right now?
I have no idea, but I think our fate is for us to be better human being, and I think that make us one. No matter how we do our prayers and follow different paths, but at the end, I think we all want to be better human being, and that make us one, and we are sharing the same values. I think the shared values of humanity is much beyond our race, color, faith path that we each are following. And refugees, I think today could be refugee, but tomorrow they could be your great supporter. Uh, you never know. I've been working to support women for over 25 years, and I feel bad, like maybe I'm on another side of the line now, and these lines can always reverse and change, but it's also good to understand that feeling with those we are working. And I think this was my unique chance in the whole process to understand all those IDP few years back, that for instance I had IDP work and research that I've done, and I was sitting in those cloth tent in borders of Kabul, and one day I didn't knew, like in United States I will be living under the same sort of tents, under the same sort of cloth borders. And this can happen to all of us, and but it's important not to lose ourselves, and respect each other's feeling, and see the issue and problems of others as our own, and don't see ourselves as a people who are provider or supporter. I think we should own the problems, and understand that refugees, more than anything, needs dignity that you can give them. That's it.
Thank you, Palwasha. Tanya, Teresa, did you want to add anything?
I just want to thank you all for this opportunity to come together like this. I was hand in hand with Palwasha for every step of that harrowing, awful journey, and hearing her retell it. it's hard because I love her so much. I think we all do. But so having this opportunity to really to come together, to share our stories, to talk so openly, and to listen to each other with our hearts, has been a really, really powerful experience and opportunity. And I'm grateful that you provided this, Becca and Ali. So thank you so much.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That was incredibly powerful and, hard to, sure, very hard for Palwasha to share. I feel so blessed and grateful that she's willing to just open up and be so vulnerable about her experience. And I just can't even imagine, what it was like having to go through something like that. Yeah, and just feeling very, very hopeful at the thought of the work that, she'll continue to do, and the work that Mina's List is continuing to do moving forward. But yeah, also just still heartbroken at everything that's occurred in the past few months. So
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not not having known anyone personally who experienced evacuation or the collapse of the Afghan government, this was a first for me to hear how it's affected individuals, and just to learn from her experience and hold her story is truly such an honor. And I just am thinking about the personal and collective traumas experienced both by women, individuals like Palwasha herself, but then just the larger country. And then even, thinking about Tanya Henderson, who had the, I guess, yeah, honor, I don't know how she would say it, of walking with Palwasha through all of the different points in the journey of fleeing the country and finally settling here, and just the secondary trauma experienced from by her and so many others, I'm sure, who had family members in Afghanistan or friends, and were part of that process as well. Obviously, not directly, but in an indirect and intimate way. Um, yeah, so I am just going to be thinking about how to be sensitive to those experiences that are still so recent, and just the pain of that. So I also just feel so privileged to have heard her story.
yeah, and I think that's such a great point that you're bringing up about um, how we listen and give space for people to be able to share their stories like that. It's such a crucial um, aspect of making peace, right? Is to be a good listener. So I think I feel grateful for that opportunity, and yeah, would hope that we could all practice listening like that whenever given the opportunity. I think something that really stood out to me from this conversation is, of course, like the obvious that, with women being included in peace processes and how crucial that is. And, so inspired by how Mina's List is continuing to carry out this work, even with everything that's collapsed. But they're not giving up, and they're creating these parallel structures and committees. And Tanya mentioned that I think they were setting up an Afghan women's parliament in Greece. And so, like, the activism, the organizing, the political leadership isn't going away. And that is really inspiring to me, because it shows that, yeah, despite everything that's happened, um, there is still so much passion and power in these women who are coming together um, to decide what they want their futures to look like. So, really
Right.
encouraged by that.
Right. Yeah. I was also incredibly encouraged to hear the work that they're continuing to do and the history they have working in Afghanistan. I think, while we're for some of our audience might be in the States or so I guess I can only speak from my context of being in the States. I kind of don't know what to do or how to engage. And so hearing from an organization that knows the context well, that's actually been working there, before the collapse of the government and what we've been hearing on the news recently, I think they're the I the ideal, the best organization to learn from and to be inspired by. They're in a incredibly unique position to respond because they understand the context best. And so, while we should all, obviously do the work of understanding and educating ourselves, um, I think there's also such a benefit from learning from people and organizations that have been doing the work already and that have been based in the context.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 5,000%. That's such a great point. And I think that's why it's so important that we come alongside organizations like Mina's List to support the work that they are doing for Afghan women and to, build a better future and the hope that there can be something peaceful in the future as well. Um, so I think, for our listeners who maybe are asking, like, well, what can I do? How can I help? I love that, Mina's List is focusing on the women whose lives have fallen apart and who had to flee and leave behind everything, including Palwasha. So, perhaps donating to this initiative that they're currently spearheading to provide assistance to those women and their families so that they can rebuild their lives. And I'm just thinking back to something Teresa had mentioned about the pandemic and on top of everything else, like and how women and girls bear the brunt of the negative effects of these issues all the time, like no matter where they are. And so I think coming alongside them and being willing to, take action, like you said, listen and learn from those who have been working on this for years and who've given their lives to it. And then, taking action by supporting what they're doing. So.
Right. Right. And I think, with the point that you bring up about, and that was brought up in our conversation, with women bearing the brunt of conflict and oppression and poverty, and in in the pandemic, how that's affected women and girls. I think that places women in a unique position to respond and then to be leaders. I imagine that it creates more of a motivation or an impetus to be part of positive transformation in those areas. And just the concept of being a wounded healer and being affected by something, and how that can in some way be transformed into positive change, and whether that's through advocacy or through a number of the initiatives that they're spearheading.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you again to Palwasha and Tanya and Teresa. It's been such an honor to have them on the podcast.
Yes.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like more info about Peace Catalyst and to help support our peace building work, please visit our website at peacecatalyst.org.